Cruise ships used to be considered fun. But in the course of the last month, an invisible and deadly passenger on board, coronavirus, has turned many of them into vessels wanted by no one.
They need to leave and go to their own countries.
It's not fair on us.
Our governments won't let them dock because they fear a deluge of sick people.
It's a big problem for Australia because we don't want to be seen as a place that cruise ships around the world can come to. We've got to make sure we solve the problem, get the cruise ships away.
Our health experts warn of catastrophe if we let them in.
So do we say, all right, we'll take you all on and we'll totally collapse and we'll become an Italy or a Spain? Do the Australian people really want that?
What the cruise ships want to protect is international staff stuck on board, some sick with coronavirus.
It is time to go to your port of origin.
How this debacle on the high seas got so out of control is an extraordinary tale that's left a growing casualty list of victims and devastated families. Are you suggesting there's been some sort of cover-up here?
Yes, I do suspect that.
I'm so lethargic, pain in the eye, like somebody's poking me in the eye, the coughing fits, you know, the sore lungs. I've had days where my skin feels like it's sunburnt. I can't touch it. My head is so sore, it's like somebody's pulled my hair.
Hidden in the suburbs, stuck inside and dreadfully sick with COVID-19, Gary Callahan has had plenty of time to get angry. His wife Kerry's meticulous cleaning and obsession with keeping her distance is working. So far, she's virus-free. The Callahans were some of the now infamous 2,700 passengers who, 2.5 weeks ago, were hurried off the Ruby Princess cruise ship, unbelievably, without being tested by health officials. Everybody on that ship was allowed to disembark without any test whatsoever.
Yes.
Yep.
Do you find that staggering?
Now, yes.
It's crazy. Well, I thought we would have been given a mask, some plastic gloves, go through the quarantine checking, you know, get your temperature checked, but everyone was left to their own device.
Yeah.
The catastrophic result of this massive oversight is that it is now the largest single source of deaths in this country. And in terms of coronavirus sufferers, 12% have now come from that one cruise ship. Ironically, on the day Gary and Kerry boarded the Ruby Princess, the passengers disembarking from the same ship on the same day were tested if they were feeling sick. Why would the previous passenger load be tested and none of you tested? Doesn't add up.
Yeah, that's shocking to us. We didn't know they had been tested when they got off, and we were all expecting to be tested when we got off because just to be sure, to be safe. You're letting us out in the public around people and nobody tested us, and I really think that was disgraceful.
Kerry and Gary knew 10 other people on board the Ruby Princess. 8 of them in total contracted COVID-19. 2 ended up in hospital. I still don't think we've got to the bottom of it.
No, we are extremely, extremely mad, sad and cranky that we weren't told that somebody potentially had it on the ship. That has infuriated us because if only everybody had known, everybody would have stayed put. Like, if we had to stay on the ship, we would have stayed there. We're just extremely mad that we weren't told anything.
All travellers entering Australia must self-isolate for 14 days.
Carnival's Princess Cruises say they've done nothing wrong. During the cruise, the ship's doctor took swabs of 15 sick passengers, but was unable to test for COVID-19. Complicating matters, there was flu on board, with 104 people taken ill suffering respiratory infections, a major symptom of coronavirus. Senior Vice President of the company, Stuart Allison, released a video statement this week.
They required guests who had reported flu-like symptoms to self-isolate in their cabins. The ship then reported these cases to federal and state authorities, as we're always obliged to do.
It's clear no other passengers were told about the flu, nor the ship's concerns about coronavirus. But these leaked emails prove the Ruby Princess did alert New South Wales Health about the sick passengers. Incredibly though, the afternoon before the ship arrived back in Sydney, the department gave the vessel a clean bill of health. They even claimed there was no risk setting for COVID-19 being on board. Now, that's an impossible thing to say because they still had to wait for the 15 swab results. And when those results came through the following day, New South Wales Health's gross mistake was exposed. 3 people tested positive to coronavirus. Does that make you angry?
Oh, it makes us furious.
Well, it's negligence, isn't it?
So somebody knew something and a lot of other people, including yourselves, weren't being told.
That's
Exactly.
right.
The last day when we're getting off in the muster areas,
There's heaps.
heaps of people had them, and they were surgical masks. And I said to Kerry, I wonder if these people are all been sick. And obviously, that's what's happened.
Well, I guess the cruise industry has sailed into the perfect storm.
As an infectious diseases specialist, Dr. Clay Gollidge is not surprised that coronavirus has thrived on cruise ships. He deems these tourist megaships as the perfect breeding ground for all viruses.
So you've got a steel and aluminium structure full of hundreds, thousands of people in relatively confined conditions. A lot of those passengers are elderly. A lot of them have heart disease, lung disease, diabetes, peripheral vascular disease, smoking, etc. You've then got the crew. The crew quarters can be pretty awful. 4 or 5 people in a room, no windows, shared bathrooms. So everything's kind of ripe for cross-infection.
What you're describing to me is the sort of perfect floating laboratory to breed these things.
Correct. It's an incubator. So it's a bacterial and viral incubator for coronavirus, and you couldn't have scripted it worse. And the longer you keep people on these ships, the more cases you're going to get.
What is also shocking to Dr. Gollidge is the lack of care cruise ships have shown, selfishly choosing to continue to sail when the world was counting down fast to a pandemic. He's adamant governments were too slow to act at the beginning and didn't focus on turning away the most infected monolithic structures of all.
And that should have been probably mid-February that the cruise industry needs to shut down. Go back to your ports, discharge your passengers, repatriate your crew, shut it all down. Yet here we were in mid-March, still people booking cruises and going off and sailing off around the world. So I'm gobsmacked by that.
But people still booked and still got on the ship.
Still booked, still got on the ship. So now we're in this storm of uncertainty. We've got ships off the East Coast. We've got a ship still stuck in Fremantle at the moment. Who knows, what's going to happen?
That ship in Fremantle is a German cruiser called the Artania. It won a battle for help just over a week ago when the WA government was forced to open up Perth hospitals for 41 sick passengers and crew. That number keeps rising, and that's why Dr. Gollidge warns this is a dangerous game.
We run the total risk. If we take all these passengers from all the ships around Australia that are ill, our health system could well collapse.
Just on the strength of what's floating off our oceans at the moment.
Totally. We don't have infinite resources. We're scrambling like mad to create more beds. So our whole system could be totally overwhelmed, yes.
This has to be one of the #1 issues in the country to solve.
On the West Coast, WA Premier Mark McGowan had a tough battle against 5 cruise ships refusing to leave Australian waters. Just this week, 4 finally departed, but that German cruiser, the Artania, still staunchly remains.
Caused me sleepless nights, it's caused me nightmares. It's one of those things that is sitting there as a potential time bomb. So it's one of the most difficult things I've had to deal with in my time as Premier.
He feels his state has done its fair share of helping out cruise ships, flying home 850 passengers and caring for 41 sick patients. But for WA, enough is enough. You were a lawyer, Premier, with the Australian Navy. What does maritime law say about this?
Well, it says you've got to look after people on the high seas, but at the same time it says that you can remove a ship from your port. So it's contradictory. I think what the Australian public wants to see is a tough approach to ensure we protect our hospital beds for Australians who need them, and we get people back to their homes as soon as possible in other countries.
Clearly those cruise ships are hanging around because they want to be within a stone's throw of a decent medical system.
Well, that's probably the answer, but that's clearly not acceptable.
So far, our federal government has ordered all cruise ships leave Australian waters by mid-June. After that, the operators face 5 years jail and a $63,000 fine. While 5 ships left Sydney Harbour late yesterday, there's still more than a dozen dotted around the country's coastline, including the Ruby Princess in Sydney and the Artania in Perth. Both have COVID-19 on board. So it's a question of almost sacrificing some of your local beds for foreign tourists. That won't go down well with the population either.
No, and that's why, the ship needs to be gotten away as soon as possible, or all those ships. That's why I'm saying there's a lot of priorities in Australia at the moment, but this really needs to be elevated to number one.
Coming up, our special coverage of the coronavirus crisis continues.
Gary Callaghan's coronavirus has terrified his wife, Kerry. She takes all the precautions she can while her husband battles the sickness. For this story, our crew kept their distance, filming from outside through the couple's lounge room window. It's unbelievably lucky, I've got to say, that Kerry, you haven't picked it up. You didn't get it. I mean, you got to buy yourself a lottery ticket.
I know. I am thankful, but I feel guilty that I don't have it as well. I feel, why me? But I just thank my lucky stars, and every day I am scared of getting it as well. As long as he's got it, I am scared I'll get it as well.
Gary and Kerry were passengers on the Ruby Princess cruise that's become a coronavirus hotspot. 10 deaths now, over a quarter of all victims in Australia, and more than 600 others infected, all from that one ship. After what they've been through, this couple is desperate to get one message out.
Everybody's still walking around outside. I think they're all thinking, it's not real, this is not real. I just want to tell those people out there that it is real, and it is dangerous, and it is killing people.
So that message about staying home, staying away from other people and social distancing, you're a huge advocate.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, it works. Kerry hasn't got it. We're in the same house.
I'm keeping my distance. I'm not touching him. People have just got to, look, give it 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it takes, give it that. And, if you're alive at the end of it, it's job well done.
Tasmanian Leonard Fisher, another tragic victim of the Ruby Princess, lost his fight with coronavirus on Monday night. Let's go back to the beginning. His son Greg is now left grieving for his 81-year-old father and wishing he'd stopped his dad from boarding.
I'd bring Dad 2 or 3 times a day, and when he was in hospital, but getting near the end, he was getting very short of breath, couldn't hold long conversations, and he did say that if he was aware that how bad this virus was, and if it was on the ship, he would never have got on the ship.
When your dad told you that he was going to take this cruise, what did you say to him? Did you advise him against it?
Yes, I did. tried to talk him out of it, but he said, at my age, I'll probably never get a chance to do another trip like this again. And he also said that if there was anything wrong on the ship, they would have cancelled it.
So he was relying on the ship being responsible?
Yes.
Why were you concerned?
Just about the impact of what the coronavirus could potentially do. You'd take these companies for what they are. You'd think if it was possibly on the ship, or if there was any sign of it, it would have been out there to the passengers.
But Greg now knows the passengers were never informed. Firstly, about flu on board, with 104 passengers told to self-isolate and wear masks, and secondly, that 15 passengers had been swabbed for COVID-19. Did your father tell you about any obvious signs of sickness on the ship?
He said that he had a gentleman sitting beside him that was coughing and coughing, about his hand over his mouth, and he was quite concerned about that.
Did he mention anything about coronavirus being talked about on the ship in an official capacity?
At no stage were the passengers told that there was a possibility of coronavirus on that boat. They were unaware of any sickness that was on that boat. It was just so wrong. Things should have been handled a lot better.
The blame game continues. Who's at fault is now being investigated by New South Wales Police. But it's already clear that the Ruby Princess alerted New South Wales Health about the sickness on board prior to arriving into Sydney. Kerry and Gary Callahan now question why they ever decided to step foot on the Ruby Princess.
I did want to cancel the cruise, but then we would have lost our money, and it's a lot of money just to throw away. If there was a concern, I would imagine that the health department or Princess or somebody should have said, cancel everything now.
Yeah, foreign affair and trade.
And nothing was done. So we're under the impression, no, okay, it is safe because we're not going to an Asian or Europe country, we're going to New Zealand, so everything must be okay. And within a couple of days, obviously it wasn't.
So because you were going to New Zealand, rather than perhaps an Asian destination, you figured that was fairly safe because you were staying within the region?
We did, yeah. Silly us. Now we feel stupid and we feel guilty that we did go.
Would you ever go on a cruise again?
No. I don't ever want to go away again.
Hello, I'm Tara Brown. Thanks for watching. To keep up with the latest from 60 Minutes Australia, make sure you subscribe to our channel. You can also download the 9Now app for full episodes and other exclusive 60 Minutes content.